Happy post-Christmas hangover to one and all. This is episode 37 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. As always, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this Tuesday evening. If you're checking me out on the YouTube channel and you enjoy the content and have enjoyed the content, please, if you haven't already, don't forget to click like and smash that subscriber bell. Or if you're joining me for the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or the other platforms, if and only if you like the content, please click like and subscribe. So I've talked about my kind of fitness journey, how I went from athletic, smaller child to a sort of lazy middle teen, and then started my fitness journey when I was my senior year of high school. And I've certainly bounced around as far as different modes of training and ideas as far as what we used to call bulking up and cutting down, and periodization, phase training, where you do different things at different times of year. But I was always a Bev's gym goer. Even as a much younger person, I met plenty of people and friends who already had home gyms of varying levels of completion. I knew a few people that had complete home gyms in their basement or other areas of the house. We just say basement. It doesn't have to be in the basement. It could be in a room, anywhere. I never really thought about getting a home gym. It isn't something that I spent that much time pondering. Every now and then I would see something, or a person would tell me about how, like, for example, if there was a snow day, or a way that we couldn't get to the gym, and it's like, oh my God, I gotta go, and then you can't. Boy, that would be convenient, wouldn't it? But I never sort of took the next step from that would be convenient, wouldn't it, to honestly looking into what's possible versus what's not realistic, versus what's practical. If you have a gym that you go to every day, and for example, let's say that you pay $500 a year for a membership, is it practical to then spend $1,000 or $2,000 or less, whatever the amount of money is? Is it practical for yourself, for your budget, for this particular time in your life? Those are the kinds of things, as the son of an accountant who's very, very mathematically oriented and was always running things through the mental meat grinder, I did go through those kinds of permutations. It wasn't really until 2020 when we started to see what was going on with COVID, and like wherever you now sit on the kind of spectrum of thoughts on it, as far as the United States did too much, didn't do enough, this state got it wrong, this state got it right, whatever it is. I'm going to talk about my experience, my thought process, and my kind of reading of the tea leaves, if you will, because there is plenty of things to debate and disagree about. But this is more how my mindset began to shift. And once it shifted, it just didn't shift back. And the not shifting back part, so like if this were a movie, COVID is not really the story. The story is how my mind began to turn and how I started to see things differently than I had before because of circumstances. That sometimes in life, you have an inciting incident that ends up not being really the important thing. It's what got you moving in a different direction. And sometimes that's for the better, and other times it's not. But many of us have memories, some of which are terrible memories, of those kind of days leading up to when New York started to we didn't really lock down, but when New York started to slow to a crawl, we could say. And what I remember was that at some point in early March, to me, it became obvious that there were things that were going to happen that we had not experienced before, regardless of whether we agreed or not. When we think about in our entire lives, how often people say the word no when we want them to say yes, and vice versa. This is something that as a much younger person I struggled with, But as a person at this point, now 46 years old, when all of this was starting to take place and everybody was wondering, well, where is this going to go? Because nobody really knew for sure. People acted like they did, but we really didn't. You just can't always predict things. And in this instance, I sensed we were heading into different territory and new territory, and what was going to happen and what were we going to do. And I remember having conversations with people that I never envisioned that I would have. And listen, I've seen, because it's always about movies with me, right? I can always talk movies, and I've seen films and had seen films. I was a huge fan, and to this day am a huge fan of the movie Outbreak. And the virus in the movie Outbreak was basically a planet killer. It was a planet killer. It was a respiratory virus like COVID. Hey, a respiratory virus like bronchitis, like the flu can often attack the lungs, pneumonia. But it had a death rate of 100%. In terms of the so-called death rate, it was even worse than the virus that we saw, if many of you want. Another great film, I Am Legend, Will Smith, right? They're doing a sequel, which is bizarre in the sense, well, I won't give it away, but the sequel follows the alternate ending of the film. That's something that I'm not familiar with. Normally, the alternate ending is not canon. But in the case of I Am Legend, that's a story where scientists figured out a way to solve one problem and then inadvertently set loose a 99% planet killer on humanity. But so I knew that, at least in theory, it was possible that some kind of a superbug. I read about the terrible flu pandemic in 1918, which literally killed tens of millions of people. I knew about the smallpox epidemic, that the single greatest advance, arguably in the history of modern science and medicine in the last 100 and however many years, was that they solved smallpox. Because smallpox in its own way could have been a planet killer. So I knew if somebody had asked me, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is it possible that some kind of a bug will disrupt our daily lives? My instinct would have been to say, no way. We've had such advances in medicine. But if I thought about it, I would have said, sometimes Hollywood, we know, is overblown and gives us a lot of bullshit, even in an entertaining package. Because like the first hour of Outbreak, I think, is incredible. Because the first hour plays like a medical thriller, like what we started to see in early COVID, where, okay, people are getting hospitalized, the death toll isn't terrible. In a movie Outbreak, people get hospitalized and 2 hours later, they're dead. You know what I mean? Again, exaggeration, Hollywood, popcorn entertainment, based on a book that the author wasn't particularly happy with the movie. But that's the frame of reference. I had already seen I Am Legend a bunch of times. And of course, you are horrified at the thought that anything like this could happen. But as far as having conversations with people that I never envisioned, which is that for the first time, I started thinking, I better buy some gear. Now, at the time, I was living in an apartment. I wasn't at my dad's house. I wasn't here in this house. But I did have enough room in the so-called living room of the apartment where if I wanted to put stuff, that's where it would go. It's not like I was living in a studio where there was no room for anything other than a toilet. Again, very fortunate. So I remember early March having conversations, and fellow gym rats I know right now are thinking about their process and what their experience was as, shit started to go sideways. And you start asking people, what are you going to do? What are you thinking? Where is this going to go? What's your take right now? And some people were saying the obvious. I hope that it's not as bad as it could be, because we see, what was going on in other countries. We saw Italy was not doing well, and China had just, now, of course, the thing with China is there are so many people that death rate, it's a little bit wonky because 5,000 people here is not 5,000 people there kind of thing. But most people that I spoke to either already had something at home or were like, Jared, it's okay. We're healthy. We don't, at least most of us don't have preconditions, because this was very much talked about back then, of course. The idea that it seemed that, for example, if you had asthma, you were probably more at risk. Like, there was a lot of stuff that ended up being wrong, but then there was stuff that ended up not being wrong. It ended up at least making sense based on what we know all this time later. Almost 4 years since the first time that we heard of it. So I decided for myself, when the people on TV, newsreaders, everybody, when they started saying phrases, little buzzwords and catchphrases, expect some disruption of your normal life. And I started asking people, what do you think they mean by that? What do you think they're talking about? I don't know. I think they're talking about shutting stuff down, don't you? I mean, when you think about it, what other kind of disruption could we mean? They're not going to stop running buses. I mean, they could stop running buses. They could stop other services. But I think they mean that the normal day-to-day life that we've all become accustomed to, wake up, go to the gym, go to work, drive to work, drive home, take the train. I think they mean there are certain components of our normal day which will not be in operation one way or another. And there were people saying, Jer, I think you're overreacting. And I remember thinking, I might be, but in this instance, I'd rather be wrong in the overreaction than the underreaction. And I was hoping, see, this is the kind of thing where you hope that you're overreacting. You hope that you're having the classic reaction of, like my mom, or no, not even my mom, my mom's mom. Anytime my mother was 5 minutes late, she was calling up the cops. Someone kidnapped her. That's an overreaction. A classic mom or grandma overreaction. When someone's running late, it's the end of the world, something's happened, oh my goodness, da-da-da-da-da. In this particular instance, I thought that I was reading the tea leaves accurately. And I was hoping what was going to happen was that I was going to order some home gym equipment. And within a couple of weeks, rates of infection would stay steady. People started social distancing, I believe, in the first week of March, or at least that we were aware of such a thing. And the worst is that I wasn't going to be one, and this is not a criticism. Remember, I don't like telling people how to spend their own money. It's nothing to do with me. But I wasn't going to spend $5,000 out of the box, especially because I didn't have unlimited space. Like here at what I call the dungeon, I have a humongous basement here, and I could fill it with whatever I want. I didn't have that kind of space. I had to be cautious and canny. And also, again, nobody knew exactly what was going to happen or how bad it was going to get, or on the other side, that maybe by, the end of March, early April, it would dissipate. Because I can remember other things, and many people in my age bracket and even younger, like older millennials, remember that in 2003, there was this thing called SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. And I remember, and many of you do, that back then there was an idea that that was going to be a lot more of a killer than it was. So that's all of us going through it. Swine flu in 2009, that was going to kill millions. You just don't know. You never know what's going to happen until it happens. And then, as we sit here at 2023, almost into 2024, we can sort of jockey back and forth and debate various points. But at that time, nobody was sure, because there were plenty of people that acted as if they knew what was going to happen, on completely different poles. And it ended up not being either of the completely different poles. But I did feel fear. And the fear that I felt wasn't so much that I thought that I was going to get sick and I was going to die of pneumonia. It was a fear of my daily routine getting altered and to where I would have no control. And just thinking about it now, I remember that sense of unease. And look, we are all creatures of habit. We are all, to some extent or another, products of routine. And my dad, may he rest in peace, is the ultimate, almost a prototype for a guy who his daily life at age 30, at age 40, at age 50, at age 60, his basic day was exactly the same. Wake up, shave, shower, get on the train, go to Manhattan, put in a full 8 hours or whatever it might be, subway, train, home, wake up the next day, repeat the process. That was his routine. He had the same day. I can't even tell you how many years worth of that day he had in his life. He was a master at it for sure, to be able to do it for that many decades as he did. But I was also that kind of rigid. This is what I must do this day. This is what I must do that day. And some friends, as I say, who already had home gyms, said stuff like, yeah, it's not that big a deal for me. Of course, they're not rooting for anything catastrophic, but yeah, I'll just, usually I train at home on weekends. My old pal Roger would tell me stuff like that. So, yeah, and if I have to, I have to. It's no big deal. Now, there are plenty of people that did not have home gyms for that kind of reason, but just for the convenience factor. The most obvious thing, well, I live like 25 minutes from Bev's, and if the weather isn't great sometimes I only have an hour and I knock it off and then I go to work, whatever the reasoning is. But I knew that I could not, in my mind, because of the fact that I was this kind of a personality, very nervous, very type A, ooh, what's going on, what's going to happen, got to know, got to ask questions, got to get answers, this is not satisfactory. On March 14th, of 2020. I cannot believe, it's hard to imagine that we are within, 3 months, 2.5 months almost, of that being 4 years ago. I took my last ever workout at Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym, a place which I had literally called my second home, my home away from home since 1993 when I was still a teenager. Now, I didn't know that day, which was a Saturday, that it was going to be my last day. I didn't know that. But what I knew was there weren't that many people there at a time where just the previous Saturday, there were a ton of people there. And I was reading the tea leaves. I saw the writing on the wall. And when I got home, I logged on to Amazon and I ordered a $100 elliptical, which I've spoken about previously. It's in the basement here. It still works after I can't even tell you how many hundreds of hours of use. The single best Amazon purchase ever, that after all of the times it's been used, it's been moved from apartment to home, to apartment, to home, to basement, in and out of the car. It still works like new. What an incredible purchase. But so that was one thing, that was critical, that I have to be able to do my hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is of cardio for this up here. Keep me nice and balanced and mellow. And feeling like I'm doing everything that I can, sort of stuff, So I got that. I ordered $100 elliptical, Sunny Health and Fitness Airwalker elliptical. And because I wasn't expecting this to be permanent, I thought that I was going to be back at Bev's in a couple of weeks, or maybe I'll just keep going. Again, we didn't know exactly where it was going to go. I bought adjustables, like old school sand-filled adjustable dumbbells that only went up to about 25 pounds. They weren't particularly well made, but it was something. It was still better than trying to do nothing but, body weight exercises. And I got a 5-way adjustable bench. Serviceable, nothing great, but okay. And what I believe was March 16th is when they started to close the gyms in New York State. The elliptical had already arrived and was already assembled, and the bench was there. I hate to say it, but for the way that I live my daily life, at least in the short term, the elliptical is the most important thing. And I know, we kind of joked around, some of the guys from Bev's, that there were people who were flipping out for different reasons. So everybody has a thing. When you are as motivated and obsessed as we are, that you would do something as absurd and ungodly, if you'll excuse the phrase, as wake up at 3:25 or 3:30 in the morning to get to the gym at 4 and blast away for 2 hours before shaving, showering, going to work, maybe even commuting to the city, or even if you're just driving to Great Neck from Woodbury, you might hit traffic. There's no easy road here. And you do that as part of your life, and this is what you love, that it is a huge part of your life. Any disruption, right, is going to be holy shit. But in my case, it almost feels like it was a Hail Mary pass. It was desperation. And I wasn't telling everybody, oh, I was right, because it didn't matter. I was just grateful and happy and fortunate that I was able to put those orders in before things really went nuts. Because when the lockdown happened, the prices of everything, and this isn't really okay, but we saw it. We've seen price gouging before. And the price gouging was absolutely absurd. Adjustable dumbbells that now you can get for like $350, like the Bowflex style that just go from 5 to like 52.5 pounds. Some of my friends were paying $800, $900, $1,000 for them. But when you are desperate, when your daily life is uprooted through no fault of your own, you do whatever you have to do. And, if you are fortunate enough that you have the resources where you can overspend, I will never, ever criticize somebody for that. Never. I'll criticize the fucking assholes who jacked up the price, Bowflex or Amazon or whoever it was, that took a product that should have been $400, $425, and suddenly they're selling it for $900. Double middle fingered salute. But with that said, my friend Dave, he got the power blocks, which are not really as good as the Bowflex, but he said the same thing. And he actually had stuff at home. He had a universal machine and some other pieces of equipment. He had a treadmill. He had an elliptical, but he needed dumbbells. And he said, Jared, I overpaid for the bricks. He called them the bricks, power blocks. They're kind of funny looking if you've ever seen power blocks. But I remember Ryan, one of my other friends trained with every day, he still goes to Bev's. Ryan got basically hosed. He wasn't the only one. A couple of other guys paid $800-900 for Bowflex. But you got to do what you got to do. And I know just for me, the first few weeks, because I wasn't a commuter, I knew plenty of people who, aside from maybe having a mask on, they were still taking the train to work. They were still taking the subways. They were still being with their coworkers in the lunchroom. Like, life changed more for me than a lot of people because I was somebody who spent a lot of time at home anyway. And when I suddenly didn't have the option, literally, of driving to Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym, my whole life was at home all of a sudden. But I remember in the early days just being grateful and thankful. Well, first off, that I was healthy, and my sister, who was in San Diego at the time, was healthy, and my mom in Florida, who was an absolute laugh riot, she was good. And I was just eternally grateful that I'd been able to assemble this stuff, because there were people, listen, nobody was jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge. Most of my friends, at least in the early days, no one got sick. Okay, this guy is doing good. The kids are good. They came home from school. There was a positive test, but they're fine. Whatever it was. But there were people who were frustrated. I didn't want to be right. And it's not like I did anything that was so wacky. I probably should have had this stuff a couple of years earlier. Because I tell you, there were times that I drove to Bev's when it was snowing. I should not have. I was taking humongous risk driving in a little Hyundai to Bev Francis Powerhouse Gym in a snowstorm. Not a good idea. But that's in the past. That never will happen again. I don't have to even think of it. But I remember when I kind of got into the routine, and it didn't take me very long to get to a new kind of set point in my brain, which was, instead of scramble awake at 3:25, get yourself together, make sure you're dressed properly, and get to Bev's by 3:58 in time for Mr. English to call and, open the gate and the whole thing. Now I wasn't setting my alarm. I was literally rolling out of bed, making a couple of energy drinks, like powder, whether it was a Monster, whatever it was. It could just be coffee and a Monster drink, and just start cranking away on the elliptical. Either have something on the phone or watch Netflix or whatever it is. There were some movies I caught up on that I had never seen. I had never seen Arnold Schwarzenegger's Raw Deal. About a week into COVID, it happened to be on Netflix. Let's watch that. And then the next day, I'd never seen Bloodsport. I'd never seen Lionheart. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Let's do some Van Damage. So that became my morning. My morning was the workout. And it wasn't Bev's. It would never be. Bev's is it's an extraordinary place. They don't call it the East Coast Mecca for nothing. So many memorable people there, so many incredible times, just so many fucking epic mornings at Bev's. But, as time went on and things started to settle down over the ensuing months, and certainly by the early to mid of the summer, most of the people I knew, even those who had put together home gyms as I had tried to do, they ended up going back. And I can't explain why I never went back, but there was really no point where I seriously considered it. I was just having so much fun working out at home. Yeah, and as time went on, I was able to kind of exchange equipment, sell some stuff on eBay to kind of finance bringing in new stuff, because nobody wants to just keep, like, if you lay out $1,000 and you want to upgrade, you're not just going to dispose of what you have and not get anything. I sold each piece except for the elliptical, but I sold the bench and I upgraded to a better bench. And I got adjustable dumbbells that were really, really good ones, which I still have. And I just began to come to terms with the fact that this is what I'm doing now. This has nothing to do with COVID. This is what I'm choosing to do for me, because I don't need to go somewhere else to train. I am self-starter, self-motivated, and I just didn't feel the need to be at a commercial gym anymore. And people say I must be health reasons. No, we're not talking about health reasons. I just felt more comfortable on my own, doing my own thing, putting headphones on, blasting away. Sometimes, even back then, using my phone to record a set and post it on social media. Oh yeah, what a flex, right? Come on. I know it's silly. I'm not that out there. But I never imagined that I would be okay not being at a commercial gym until circumstances kind of compelled it to be so. And then it turned out I just didn't miss it. And so in a sense, it would have been like forcing the issue if I had gone back when I really didn't feel like it was necessary. That's really it. It was never a financial issue. I know some people who sold the stuff that they had purchased, and other people kept it. And I remember my old friend Al, oddly enough, a man named Alan Cohen, an ophthalmologist, eye doctor with the same name as my CPA dad that got such a kick out of that. His name's Alan Cohen, yeah. He was one who had told me about his home gym in 2019. And he's like, oh, you should see the setup. And another friend, Randy, had an incredible home gym in his basement going back to when he first moved into the house, near Huntington Bay. But we hear the cliche that things happen for a reason. And the way that I just look at this, that it is part of the so-called fitness journey. And I'm now very close to hitting the half-century mark. And we have seasons in life. And Bev's Gym was a huge part of my life for 27 years. 27 years, folks. 27 years. I joined up in March of 1993. I was still a teenager. I was still at Nassau Community College, for crying out loud. I was a year and a half away from New York University, and my first experience with waking up early in the morning to go to the gym. But 27 years of my fitness journey was spent almost entirely, except when I was on vacation, of course, almost entirely at Bev's Gym. And from March 14th, actually March 15th if you want to be technical, until now, 95+%, again, vacations accepted, 95+% of my workouts have taken place in a home gym or a clubhouse gym where there's never anybody there. So it's almost like having two home gyms, because I get to the clubhouse to use the elliptical 5 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever time it might be. There's nobody there. Once in a great while, on weekends, there might be one or two people. There was actually an unbelievable moment 2 weeks ago, Saturday, where there were 5 people in there at the same time. That doesn't happen. But the idea is, I didn't need, as much as I love the community atmosphere, I didn't need it to thrive. And sometimes you just want to be by yourself. And I found that when it has come to working out, the solitude works for me. And it's not something, as a person who was always lonely and, didn't get along with people, it's difficult to imagine, but it happened. The mindset shifted and didn't shift back, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to shift back. And with that, we've come to the end of episode 37 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all once again for going on this little reverie back into the recent past and even almost the current present. And if you check this out on the YouTube channel, please don't forget to click like and smash the subscriber bell. Or if you're on Spotify, iTunes, or any of the audio platforms and you like the content, please click like and subscribe. I'll be back with episode 38 very, very soon. yours in health. Take care.